This was 2:30 a.m. this morning. This is the future state of the motion picture industry.
"50-50 by 2020 to get women to get the bigger budgets as well."
It's very, very important that we put the stories in the hands of the people who own those stories.
Ooh, good afternoon. What a lovely turnout. Well, of course. I mean, hello. Good afternoon. I'm Karina Rotenstein. I'm the TIFF Industry Conference producer. Welcome to day 3 of the conference, day 4 of the festival. Yeah. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that today's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the sponsors and supporters who make everything TIFF does possible. Our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oréal Paris, and Visa, and our major industry supporters, Ontario Creates and Telefilm Canada. This session is co-programmed with TIFF Filmmaker Lab, TIFF's year-round talent development program for 18 filmmakers, Canadian and international. For more information about our program and application process, please visit tiff.net/industry. And this afternoon's masterclass is a Share Her Journey initiative generously supported by Betty Ann Heggie. Yes, we thank Betty Ann for her support of our industry programming and her dedication to advancing women in the industry. Thank you, Betty Ann. Yes. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Just a reminder, there's no professional photography or video recording. However, we are live streaming and recording the talk for you, so we know you'll want to watch it over and over and over again. This will be on our TIFF Talks YouTube channel, so it will live there, so just feel free to watch and share. And also, please use our hashtag TIFF19 to engage with our online audiences. And hello to everyone tuning in. Lulu Wang, what can I say? Born in Beijing, raised in Miami, educated in Boston, writer-director Lulu Wang has emerged as one of the eminent voices in cinema. This classically trained pianist turned filmmaker debuted her sophomore film, The Farewell, at Sundance earlier this year, and is now playing in nearly 500 screens across North America and around the world, continuing. The Farewell has touched the hearts and minds of families across every cultural background, made us all hug our grandmothers a little bit deeper, and had the best opening weekend per theater average this year, topping the Avengers Endgame. Lulu's the recipient of the Chaz and Roger Ebert Directing Fellowship. She was listed by Variety as one of 10 directors to watch in 2019, and it is no surprise. She expresses her ideas so clearly in her storytelling. She delivers her vision with cinematic intelligence and astute conviction. Last month, Lulu came to the TIFF Bell Lightbox to present a sneak preview of The Farewell, and during the Q&A, she just had so much to say. So we invited her back as a governor and mentor for TIFF's Filmmaker Lab participants, and here today to present a personal masterclass session. We are thrilled and honored to have her here, and without further ado, please welcome to the stage, Lulu Wang.
I'm always like hidden behind these podiums, and I'm wearing heels, and I still feel like it's way too high. Thank you so much, TIFF, for having me here. I'm really excited to talk about some things. First of all, I want to tell a story. I was at a clothing store in Beverly Hills a couple months ago with a friend. My friend brought me there to get something really nice to wear for a red carpet event. I didn't buy anything, but I had an epiphany in the bathroom. So I'm literally sitting on the toilet of this fancy store when I hear French over the speakers. Le Bouton, Balenciaga, Gucci. It was a recording that was made to teach their global clientele how to pronounce French designer names. Why? As a sign of respect to the designers, maybe, to the French language, or maybe because the clientele of these stores would be embarrassed if they mispronounce these names. In China, there are entire workshops and classes for the rising elite that teaches them how to pronounce global brand names. Oh, and of course, there's Christian Lacroix, which is not to be confused with the flavored sparkling water LaCroix, which has the same spelling, but because it's from Wisconsin, the brand insists that it's pronounced LaCroix so that it rhymes with enjoy. There are countless articles and YouTube videos on this topic, which I will, because none of these people know. So the names that we care about to pronounce correctly, or that we care enough about to pronounce correctly, says a lot about who and what we value. All my life, people have been mispronouncing my last name, including myself. And it's not like it's a difficult last name. Wang is the most common Chinese last name in the world, with 93 million people bearing the last name in China alone. When I moved to the States at 6 years old, everyone said Wang. And until at some point, I just started introducing myself as Lulu Wang. I don't remember when that happened. And by the way, if you're one of these people who's been mispronouncing my last name or this last name in general wrong your entire life, I'm not here to shame you. This isn't, a lesson on Chinese last names, but yes, in case you're wondering, all of these Chinese last names have been pronounced wrong. Yang is Yang, Chang is Chang, Kang is Kang. Anyways, you get the point. But my point here is that I want to talk a little bit about the process of centering ourselves in our own stories. Because when your perspective has not been historically represented, how do you reframe that perspective? I've talked a lot. Oh, sorry, I think I missed that. Okay. I've talked a lot about the unconscious biases from the industry that I've had to face while trying to make this very personal film. People always ask me how I was able to navigate all of these gatekeepers that stood in my way, those who asked me if the film was Chinese or American, who questioned my casting choices, language choices, and other specificities that I knew were important to telling the story. I've also talked about drawing boundaries and saying no, but the more nuanced thing that I feel like, hasn't talked about as much, and I think is important to talk about, was figuring out how to decolonize my own voice and my own perspective. Because, as I said, for most of my life, I've been saying my own last name wrong. And why? To assimilate, to not take up space, or maybe simply because it was easier for survival. And I would come home and my father was, and always has been Haiyan Wang, spelled with an A. But for me, I was Lulu Wang. And so this is what it means to be torn between your identities. And you can say it was because I was born in China and I moved over when I was 6, but my brother was born in the States. And at some point, I realized that he unconsciously was doing the same thing. And he was introducing himself as Anthony Wang. As a survival mechanism, we often adapt ourselves to the lens that others see us through, and I had to learn to see myself and my family through a new lens, a lens that didn't yet exist. So having grown up in the States with American media, I was accustomed to being marginalized in stories, people like me, and that became a really integral part of my own way of seeing and writing. And years ago, I heard Ava DuVernay do a talk about how independent filmmakers, often wear a cloak of desperation. And we think we're passionate, ambitious, but sometimes it's just desperation. And that desperation stinks from a mile away when you walk into the room, when you're pitching a story, when you're talking about your stories. So how does marginalization contribute to even deeper desperation? And how does that affect our work when we're constantly reminded of scarcity? Having always felt other, it affected the way I approach storytelling because I think I felt like I needed to compensate for my smallness, for my otherness, to be funnier, to be more dramatic, to perform so that I could be accepted. And so when you've spent your whole life seeing images of yourself marginalized, how do you not accidentally marginalize yourself? To not be the jester, the clown in the room, to not be funny, to not be the joke, and to not have to justify or explain your existence, and to just be. In the farewell, I invited the audience to laugh at my family, but not for the same reasons that other non-Asian filmmakers might invite the audience to laugh at their Asian characters. I want to say that I'm incredibly grateful to Big Beach, the production company, who came to me after hearing the podcast on This American Life, because they resonated with the story on a really human level. And we made the film before Crazy Rich Asians came out. So they took a chance. It wasn't part of some trend of Asians being cool. They resonated with it on a human level, and they took a chance by agreeing to finance the film before they had even read a script. And what that did was that it, having the finance in place was that it really freed me from the song and dance that we all have to do to get our films financed. But what that did was it removed the cloak of desperation, and it freed me up to actually figure out what my voice is without all of that noise. And I want to talk just a little bit about the specifics of our process, of my process with my collaborators, most of whom were not Asian American. And I hope that, these specifics are helpful because it might, help other writer-directors and producers and executives and these quote-unquote gatekeepers to find a common language in order to talk about reframing the existing narratives, in order to tell stories that are as universally human as they are culturally specific. So in addressing notes throughout the process of development and production and even post-production, I often had to decipher which notes were story notes and which notes came from a cultural blind spot. And it was actually very tricky to make that distinction because, as I said earlier, I've bought into a lot of these existing narratives. And I also want to really emphasize that this is not a criticism at all to anyone who, feels like they've had these cultural blind spots, because what I'm saying is that we all have blind spots, myself included, in a story about my own family and my own life. And so collaboration is really important in order to learn from each other and find that common language. So there were two notes that came up consistently throughout the process that exemplifies the delineation between a story note and a cultural ignorance note. The first one was the idea that there were too many meals in the script. So pretty early, the producers read the script and said, there's a lot of eating. There's a lot of scenes around a table with the family talking and eating. And it's really repetitive. And I was like, I know, exactly. That's the point. They were like, no, but we think it's going to be repetitive for the audience. And if, we're going all the way to China to shoot, why not take advantage of production value and see more of China? I said, well, what should they do? They're not going to go to the Great Wall. Maybe they go for a walk in the park. And it's like, why would they do that? There's like 12 of them, and there's a wedding to plan, and grandma's dying. Like, why would they go for a walk in the park? I have never walked in the park. I don't know how to write that. And so it was really challenging because I had to figure out, is it going to be repetitive for an audience? Even though this is the reality of my experience, we all know that storytelling, in narrative fiction, we can't be married to factual accuracy. It's all about what best serves the story. And so I really started thinking about, why I had all of these meal scenes, aside from the fact that this is realistic. But what does that mean? What does it mean to this experience? How did it make me feel while I was there? And, I came up with a lot of ideas about how the eating was a way of forcing filling the space of the things that were unspoken. And what it really did for me was I realized that, yes, all of these were meal scenes, but I had to make sure that they were all different, that they all served a different purpose, and that I was shooting them in a visually different way so that they were distinguishable, and so they each had their place in the movie. And we also went on a location scouting trip pretty early in the process. I just, said to the producers, I said, you guys just have to go there because there's some things that you'll understand once you go. And so, of course, they went, and after the third day, they were like, oh, yeah, don't change the script, we get it. Oh my God, there's so much eating, I can't eat anymore. Please tell your family. I was like, sorry, gotta keep eating or they're gonna think you hate them. And so they started to feel that pressure and tension that Billy feels in the story. And, and so they started to really understand this world not from a cerebral place of logic, of reading something on a page, but from an experiential place. And films are experiential and emotional. So this is a really important distinction. The other note that I got regularly was that the mother is too mean, to the point that she's unlikable. I think that meanness is very subjective, and I did think that this was cultural. In one scene in the film, the family's comparing raising kids to investments like a stock market, and with a very sharp humor, the mother says to Billy, but you're a losing stock. This line was consistently on the chopping block time and time again. And even my editor, who I've worked with on my last 3 films, who really understands me, agreed that it's very, very mean. So we talked about it, and what we ended up doing was I said, but she's funny, she's sharp, and so we found a take where she smiles a little more, and there's a glimmer in her eye when she says it. Showed it to the producers, still felt it was too mean, wanted to cut it, and that's when I was just like, no, it's gotta stay, I gotta keep it. And I think that the audience, a lot of Asian Americans especially, have come up to me and really resonated with the mother character. But of course then, the film premieres at Sundance, and we have a standing ovation, and everybody's really excited. And one of the first things that my mother says to my partner and my brother is, I'm not that mean, am I? I'm not like that woman. And my partner said, no, you're not like that at all. You have to understand she's a filmmaker, and filmmakers dramatize things, and, sometimes it deviates and makes things more dramatic. And then my brother's like, what are you talking about? She is exactly like that. Mom, you are exactly like that. And so I asked my brother, and I was like, yeah, that losing stock line, like everybody has an issue with it. And do you think it was too mean? And he was like, I literally think she said that to me last week. So, perspective. It's really important to have our perspectives challenged, whether it's a story node or a cultural blind spot. But all of this helped me to clarify my intention, and clarify it enough to communicate to people who don't come from where I come from. Talking about the specifics of our process is important because it's the only way we can get beyond a surface level conversation about representation. The narrative in the media is often very polarizing, creating a divide between the filmmaker and the gatekeepers, between someone who looks like me and the establishment. But the truth is, the farewell only exists because of a collaboration between all kinds of people from all different backgrounds and perspectives. And it took a lot of thoughtful communication and trust to make the farewell. Film is a collaborative medium, and America is a collaborative nation. All of us are responsible for questioning our own assumptions in order to not only represent a diverse landscape of people and perspectives, but to center those different people and perspectives in their own stories. And all that said, really my mission here today is just to get people to say my last name correctly, and to get all Asian Americans to reclaim the correct pronunciation of their family names with pride. So if you know any other Wangs that are going by Wang, and you can help me with this mission, please spread the word. Thank you. I think we're gonna do a Q&A, so. Oh, here, right here, okay. All right.
Thanks for that. My name is Joanna, and I use the name Joanna when I know that it's a very short interaction. And you mentioned that people do that sometimes for survival. So can you talk a little bit about, because in a sense you kind of put the responsibility on yourself to make that change, but then those teachable moments that we have to have when we have to repeat and kind of have that I'm going to speak slowly now moment that happens sometimes socially but professionally, and how you manage teaching people that you're also asking them to come on and help you with your projects.
Yeah, it is really tricky, and it does get exhausting, I won't lie, you know? And I think that what helped me through the process was one, the ultimate goal, that it was really important for me to tell my story and my family story and represent it properly. And so I think that was the engine that kept me going. But also I had a group of friends who are all directors, and we formed this group specifically as a group of directors who are all women of color. And there's 5 of us. And when we first formed the group, it was almost sort of this like political statement, but we just naturally all became friends, and I couldn't have gotten through it without them. And it was so helpful for me to go to them and help them try to decipher whether it's a story no or whether it's a cultural no. You know, to talk to other people who have shared the experiences that I have, and to say, okay, like, you get it, right? And so how do I then translate it? And that doesn't mitigate the work and the exhaustion, but spiritually, it helped.
Hello, I'm over here. Hi. My name's Kaya. I'm a recent film school graduate. I graduated 2 months ago. Thanks. There's like stories that I've always wanted to tell about my family, my background, and kind of the person that I am today has to do a lot with the stuff that I went through as a kid, and I've always wanted to share that. But the other side of that is the fear of letting people also like know about that, because sometimes there's some stuff you don't want to share, but it's important to the story. So I'm wondering kind of either advice or like something to, if you have advice to tell stories that maybe it might be a little hard to tell, but it might be worth it. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that filmmaking and good filmmaking requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage, and that's just what we do. And it's scary, and it's it's intimidating, but I think that it's also, for me anyways, a form of therapy. And so you do have to, no one else can tell you, you know, you have to know for yourself what you're willing to share and what you're not, and how far you're willing to go. And for me, with the farewell, it was even more challenging, because the things that I wanted to tell and wasn't sure if I should or not wasn't just mine. It belonged to my family. And I had to be really sensitive, like, how is my father gonna feel about me putting him in his underwear, drunk, red underwear, and being tossed around on a bed? He actually was fine with it. So, you know, I think that no one else can answer those questions, but my process was a slow one. You know, I would start, and then I would just keep digging and digging and digging, and I would have conversations with friends and people that I trusted, and have breakthroughs in the process that would then go into the script, even if it was like, you know, later. It's a process of exploration, as opposed to, for me, going in knowing exactly what the film is, how it starts, how it ends, and exactly what I'm trying to say. You know, I enter it with questions, and then through that process, I explore different sides of the coins.
Hi, my name is Carolyn, and first of all, I need to tell you thank you. I saw The Farewell in LA for the Golden Open event, and that film, I think, is one of the most personal films I've ever seen for a filmmaker, and also for me as an audience member. And the reason I have to say this is, within 5 minutes, I started crying because I saw myself in Nai Nai. And that film actually allowed me to be more open about things that I was experiencing. And I'm not going to be afraid to say here, like, I had a tumor. I had a brain tumor, and they actually removed it 3 weeks ago. And thank you. And the thing is I'm a film critic, I'm a writer. And I wanted to write about the film. I said I was going to do a review, and I could not. I physically couldn't do a review. I have the whole piece in my head, and I couldn't write it. And after I saw the film, I was like, I didn't know how to express myself. And the way how you show the joy that night I still had, and my friend was like, she didn't understand that. And I'm like, I understand that. And I'm like, she knew exactly what was going on. I'm like, they were like, there is a benign shadow. I'm like, she knew exactly what was going on. And that's the first time I've ever seen anyone actually say that, because I also have MS. And part of MS is benign lesions, they're like shadows. So I saw a lot of things that happened on screen I actually related to personally. And I just, for me as a writer, I've always wondered how filmmakers go about making something so personal and expressing it and not being afraid to show it. But then, as you just said, you had to question and you had to make sure that what you were doing was okay with your family and it was okay with you. And I just want to tell you thank you for that, because like that meant so much to me. And luckily, like I also have to say, like they did a biopsy of the tumor and it's benign. So that means so much to me. And to see Nai Nai live like 6 years at the end, it was like, I'm like, that's me. And I'm like, I plan to live 6 more years. I'm like, screw cancer anyway. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Should I? Okay. Hi. Okay. Hi, Lula. Lulu, sorry. I just wanted to ask you, when you talked about how you were inviting the audience to laugh at your family, but in a way not that other filmmakers would go about doing that, I wanted to ask you, how do you achieve that? Because I'm a filmmaker too, and I always want to write stories about my family. I'm African, but I always kind of worry, if I do this, will people who aren't from the same background as me laugh at them, not in a sense like laughing at them because they think it's like in a negative way? How do you go about achieving that?
It's a great question that I've asked myself a lot, and I recently asked Ruben Oslin. So this is actually was his response. He said the difference is distance. That if you are not distant from your characters, if that is not an other and that you are over here and they are over there, if you are laughing at them because you're really laughing at yourself, that's a difference, And it's like, I laughed at my uncle crying, because he's a little silly. He kept telling me not to cry, and then he cries. So it's ironic, and I had a little bit of like, haha. But also, he was me. He was all of us. He was our whole family. Like the desire to, the inability to hold in your emotions when they're so powerful. I wasn't laughing from a distance. I'm laughing. Not with him because he's not laughing, but I am laughing at the humanity. I'm not laughing at the culture and he's not a joke, I'm laughing at the situation. And so I think that, I think with humor it's so tricky because I love comedy and I love humor, and I'm always trying to figure out, like, where is my gaze in the humor? Where is the joke? Who is the joke? What is it the situation? Is it the person? And what about them? And I think that those questions are important to ask when you are doing a comedy pass.
Time for one more question. One more. Right over here.
Hi, my name is Karen. I'm a culture reporter, and I wanted to ask about how do you figure out who are the right collaborators in increasing representation when they often don't look like you or many women of color in the industry, and figuring out who are the right people to not only give you financing and opportunities, but mentorship and open the right doors for you without also feeling like they are taking an unfair ownership over your career and your success?
Yes, absolutely. And because, as I was saying earlier, when you have this cloak of desperation in some ways, when you get any kind of a yes, you just want to be like, oh my God, somebody wants to partner and invest. And that can sometimes do more injustice. And if you're not given the right amount of resources and you're set up for failure, all people are going to see is that it's not good, right? The result. Nobody thinks about what the conditions were that you were forced to make something. And so, yeah, I think it's a really important question. And I think that you just have to talk to them. You have to ask questions. And I know it's hard to, maybe get like final cut or final pen when you're just starting out. But so I think that it's really just, being very clear about the type of story that you want to make, and almost think ahead, like what are the difficulties, right? Like one of the first thing I said was when I started pitching the film, there were people that didn't want to do it in Mandarin, didn't want to do an all Asian cast. So those were the first things that I talked about. I didn't, skirt away from those subjects, and I just addressed them directly and was like, okay, you like the story, but I'm not changing these things. Do you still like the story? And I think you have to be not afraid to ask those questions up front. And even in setting up projects now where people want to work with me because of the success of The Farewell, I still am very, very wary because, I want to get all of those conversations out at the front, as opposed to signing a deal and then realizing sometime in the middle, after you've already gone down this path, that you're not on the same page. But one last thing is that, you can do all of this talking and planning, but also so much of it is just luck. Like I didn't know, my producer Danny's here, Danny Melia. She was not the person who first came to option the story, but she was a producer and she was the lead producer. But, it wasn't originally set up that way, but ultimately became that way. And there's no way that I could have predicted that she would be such an important partner to me. And so I think that sometimes you also just, if you partner with people, good people, then you have to trust that they know other good people, and you take that leap of faith.
You've given us so much to think about. Lulu, thank you so much. Thank all of you. Lulu Wang, everybody. And stay tuned. Our next session is the 3 for 30 with Franklin Leonard and Kate Hagen. So come on back. Thank you.